what are you using to progress from phase to phase? Is that where your key performance indicators come in? Or are those things that you're assessing and appraising session to session? And are there times where somebody has seemingly progressed to another spot on the continuum, but have now regressed based on many, many factors? But how are you appraising that?
Yeah, that's a great point. The big thing is, it's not really. I'll say, session to session. Yes, we are assessing and appraising how they're performing, and that's going to be with any. I tell my students this too. Every follow up, every session is going to be almost like to a certain degree, a re-eval where we're reassessing the individual. So every exercise is to a degree a test to see how they're performing. So a lot of people think we have to have this formal testing in order to determine whether or not someone can proceed to the next stage or have their stresses manipulated. Formal testing is great. We need that because it holds us accountable as clinicians, but we can also look at the exercise that they're performing as well. But I would say, I do like to use specific parameters and key performance indicators for whatever sport it is. So I'm thinking of like a needs analysis. First is going to be what is the sport, what is the prior history of injury, and what is it that they already have, and what is it that they need at that time in order to bridge the gap from where they are to where they're going to be or where they want to be. And so if we're thinking of athletic foundation, I want to make sure prior to, or homeostasis restoration, prior to moving to athletic foundation, do they have the ability to ambulate? Can they navigate and negotiate going up and down steps? Do they need any type of assistive device such as crutches? If they still need those and have those parameters set, then they're not ready to rigorously be immersed in the athletic foundation phase because we still have some accommodation of movement that might not be as beneficial when we get into that phase of really loading the tissue globally. And so then when I look at athletic foundation, that might be something to where at the end of that phase, we're looking at things such as maybe a Y balance test, just looking at triplanar competency and orientation and confidence on one limb. We might look at things such as just overall, hey, can you perform? And again, it depends for the sport. But if I'm looking at a split squat or a goblet squat, a certain percentage of their body weight, because we know in the biomotor integration phase, we're going to start to implement some plyometrics. And I want to make sure they can handle a certain amount of external load appropriately prior to having that much force at that velocity go through the tissue with plyometrics. If we go through the performance or the performance actualization phase, which is the last phase, that's going to be more of like your 5-10-5 is what you're looking at for those individuals. But hopefully prior to that, you've done some other testing that on their last day or their day of discharge or their day of getting back into competition or at least practice, you've already checked off a lot of boxes. We've done some hop testing as well. Now, a lot of people will say, oh, well, hop testing or limb symmetry index isn't necessarily that great. That's very true, and that's fair. But if we just throw our hands up and say, well, nothing matters, and all the research shows that the testing doesn't really give us all the answers, then, well, are you just going to train and just not do anything at all and not be accountable? I think we can have some, we need something that the profession kind of agrees on, or something to say, hey, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to stick to it. I'm going to see what the presentation looks like. And then from there, I can better triage the situation and come up with the appropriate intervention based off of the information that I just got from, again, maybe a hop test or a Y balance test, or from some of the strength testing that we would look at as well, or single leg triplanar competencies. Those are the things that I'm looking at for key performance indicators or the needs analysis within each particular phase.
The key seems to be having measures and qualifying those with what you're seeing subjectively with the athlete, and also probably what they're, giving you subjectively, with the feedback that they're providing you. So all of those things taken into account to make the determination of moving left or right on the continuum. My criticisms with our models and different rehab phases in general, which I subscribe to phases because they're reductionist models by definition. I mean, we're reducing we're trying to make it look good on paper first. This has got to make sense to me conceptually, because that's what a phase is. When you look at it on paper, it makes complete sense. Then the issue clinically is the variability of their presentation on the day-to-day. And, I thought we progressed to this phase, but now they've regressed a little bit. And so we're not actually at that phase. And if you look at it in a very deterministic way, like once you reach a new phase, the old phase is in the past and it no longer applies, or we're only determining when to progress to the next phase based on time. After 4 to 6 weeks, you're going to be at this phase, or after 4 months, you're now at this phase. That's where I think we run into problems with these things. And I really was interested to hear what you had to say there, and I think that the take-home points are really, really important. That these are it's a conceptual framework, but it's a continuum, and it's fluid. Because you mentioned allostasis earlier, and allostasis is, if we can distill the definition down there, is stability in the presence of change. So these things are really variable, and I like the take home points of theirs. You've got your key performance indicators progress in complexity themselves as you go up. So it's like you went from 1, can you walk, to 2, down the line, you've got these more complex integrated tests. And so that's kind of what we're looking at. And the person accumulates fitness, and they're going to be passing the older tests more consistently. But I guess my big point here is for the listeners is it's not going to be black and white. There's going to be some steps forward and a little bit of steps back, and maybe a lot of steps back and then a little step forward. But when you look at overall trends, they're going to be going in the right direction. It's just not linear.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
the trajectory is going to be overall, upward, but there's going to be, ups and downs throughout the entire process. But like we mentioned earlier, as long as we set forth that expectation and that education, I think that the athlete is a little bit more secure in that process, and they understand that, and so they don't become pessimistic in the process. They keep that optimism that we've tried to cultivate from the beginning throughout the entirety of the process, from the rehabbing or reconditioning standpoint.
And that's the biggest thing. I think we, as clinicians, we see it as linear. It's on the page. These are the phases. It's gonna go in this order. And if we educate the athlete, like, these are the phases that we're going to be working on, they might think it's linear too. So to your point, it's just like, so you set that expectation right up front. This is where we're headed, but it's gonna be an up and down. It's gonna be an up and down road to get there. Yeah.
We're going to have some speed bumps and some roadblocks and things like that, but we're going to know how to navigate through the noise because we have our principles in our back pocket.
Yeah, that's great. That's really, really great.